So I began this project with, as I often do, a question in mind. And that question in particular was, what is the relationship between the performance practice of artists and the object-based practice of artists, especially those artists who focused equally on both. And of course, like all exhibitions I've organized, I didn't have the hope of an answer, but maybe the possibility to expand the question, ask more questions, leave traces of these. So if we take from what Catherine Wood, the curator at the Tate of Performance, has suggested as three main categories of performance art, there is the I, which is the individual vision of a performance artist. Often they perform themselves. The we, which is the collective type of performance with multiple performers interacting. It's often also associated with social practice. And the it. And by the it, she meant the object itself. And so that was an area I wanted to focus on and expand, especially what is the role of the it, the relationship between subject and object, in a group setting, and how did these things come together and interact. Pretty immediately once we had planned this exhibition, which I titled, based on my research, The Performing Object, in which I hypothesized that objects themselves could perform and have that kind of relationship with the viewer. COVID closed the possibility of having an exhibition with any viewers. So I had to shift my focus a bit. And the first artist that I was thinking about was Daniel Topka, who I had worked with previously in a couple of exhibitions. And because there was going to be no viewers, he proposed to show this sculpture which represented presence and absence, and that was a sculpture that was made by dipping his Calvin Klein underwear in resin and turning it into a flower vase that he would then put live flowers in, and we would document that process of change. He, for the exhibition, made a second vase with the Calvin Klein underwear of his boyfriend, and together they made a kind of coupling, a kind of doubling. They suggested, of course, the wearing of these objects, perhaps the love of these objects, the way that the objects interacted with the body, and then all of a sudden how they became something else. Another one of the core artists that I invited was Amadeus, and he reacted to these vase sculptures of Daniel and decided to make a candle with a pair of underwear as the candle stand, as the candle holder. And I asked him, oh, how would you like to present this? And almost as a joke, he sent me the music video of Papa Can You Hear Me, which is a performance by the quite famous Jewish-American musician Barbra Streisand. She performed it in a film called Yentl, where she dresses as a male in order to enter the male-female divided world of Jewish spirituality, of being a rabbi. And I thought this film was amazing in many ways because it challenged all these binary norms that we had about gender, and then immediately brought a kind of gendering to this object that Amadeus created. So even though he had sent it as, oh, let's present this small object in this grand way, we ran with it. And ultimately what you see in the exhibition, which is not, of course, available to be seen in person, is a video of a singer that we invited who re-performs or reenacts the song Papa Can You Hear Me in front of this candle that Amadeus has created. Then he placed that on a tree trunk and then put it into the space. That somehow interacted in a way with the work of Ellie and Sally, and they decided to create a kind of arena that was for boxing and also for fashion. And immediately the idea came to mind about contamination. So it wasn't just collaboration, adding more. It was these things bleeding into each other, these things at the boundary zones, blurring and finding these liminal spaces. This term that is often recalled from Foucault, the heterotopia. That expanded across the whole space of the KUNSTRAUM and the Park House in Potsdamer Straße. So Ellie and Sally created a kind of arena. That arena spread into the work which Abby had done, again with a collective of larger people who were washing and doing these rituals with salt and water. And then, finally the interaction with Bradford, and he was making a duet with a brick, and I think that was the most kind of hermetic, obvious interaction between the performer and the object, because he literally danced with the object. So what happens once all the performers are gone? Are these just props? Were they just used as part of the performances. No, in fact, they're their own sculptures, and my hope is that they carry within them the activation and the action of the performers themselves, and that can be recreated in the mind of the viewer. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not even to some degree of imagination, but that one feels the energy within them. So the final duo that performed was Finya and Daniel, and they had created in the space a massive triangulation across 3 of the pillars of the park house with foil, and then punctured that foil with holes, and were able to move below, above, and within. And I think of that also as a kind of contamination of the whole space in the ways in which the performers and their bodies can move through the architecture. So ultimately, I hope you can enjoy the videos. We created a video series, and so this is also the relationship between performance and image. Ultimately, in the end, we live in an extraordinarily image-based society, and I hope the images also carry their own strength as well as the objects.